They call it Divergent.
Welcome back to the Domin Recap channel. Today I'm going to show you a fantastic drama sci-fi film called Divergent. In the not-so-distant future, the world has survived a terrible global war, everything on the planet was destroyed, and only one enormous city remained. The Founding Fathers built a massive wall around the city and divided society into 5 factions in order to preserve peace. The first faction is called Amity. They work the land, grow crops, and are always content with everything. The second faction is called Erudite. It is home to the intellectually gifted, for whom logic and knowledge are above all else. The third faction is called Candor. It consists of people who always tell the truth, even if many don't like it. The fourth faction is called Dauntless. These are soldiers, military personnel, and guards. They are the bravest, fearless, and free people. Some consider them crazy. The fifth faction is called Abnegation. Others call them the Selfless. They dedicate themselves to caring for and helping those close to them and those in need. They also feed the factionless, people who did not fit into any faction. Since they dedicate themselves to serving society, they were chosen as the leaders who govern the city. Everything runs like clockwork. Everyone knows their place. One morning, a mother named Natalie was preparing her daughter Beatrice for an upcoming exam that would determine her future. She reassured her daughter that every 16-year-old in the city goes through this and that everything would be fine. Beatrice was afraid that the test might not show her belonging to abnegation, which would mean she'd have to part ways with her family. Later, speaking from the stage, Janine spoke about how the faction system was one living organism that only thrives when each person finds their place within it. One by one, the teenagers were called to the center of the hall, where they had to cut their hand and drop a drop of blood into a bowl that symbolized a particular faction. When it was Caleb's turn, he cut his hand and dropped his blood into the bowl of Erudite. Their parents were shocked. Immediately after, Beatrice slowly descended the stairs, took a sharp knife in her hand, and paused, deciding which bowl she wanted to drop her blood into. Ultimately, she chose Dauntless. Right after the ceremony, all the new Dauntless members ran joyfully through the streets and then began climbing metal supports up to the railroad tracks. Beatrice had to follow along and, with some difficulty, made it to the top. A train appeared from around the corner and passed by without stopping, and everyone nearby first ran and then leapt onto the steps and climbed inside. Beatrice, having no physical training whatsoever, barely managed at the last second to jump through the last door just before the platform ended. There she met a new recruit named Christina, who had also come to Dauntless from another faction. After 10 minutes of riding, everyone on the train began jumping onto the roof of the moving car. Whoever couldn't do it would become factionless. Beatrice and her new friend jumped as well. Then one of their commanders named Eric said that the entrance to Dauntless was below, and anyone who couldn't jump into the unknown had no place among them. Beatrice agreed to be the first to try to conquer her fear. She held her breath and jumped from the parapet, falling several dozen meters before landing safely in a safety net, from which she was lifted by one of the Dauntless commanders named Four, and she told him her name was Triss. He then led them to a vast space called the Pit and said it was the most important place in their faction's life. He showed them where they would sleep for the next 10 weeks, as well as the showers and communal bathroom, regardless of whether you were a man or a woman. After changing into new clothes, tossing the old ones into a burning pit, they went to a large cafeteria where it was very loud and it seemed like everyone was staring at them. Sitting at the table next to Four, they began discussing which factions each of them had come from and what they had done there. The commander ordered them to be quiet and said they were dauntless now, and when Triss asked him what faction he was from, she realized she was not allowed to speak to him without permission. A few minutes later, the faction's leader appeared and told the initiates that they were now warriors and protectors of this city and all its inhabitants. The next morning, Four woke the initiates and told them he'd be waiting in the pit in 2 minutes. There, he informed them that training consisted of 2 stages, a physical one, where they would train their bodies and spirit, and a psychological one, which would help them cope with various difficult situations. They would be evaluated alongside the born Dauntless members, and at the end they would be assigned either to guard the perimeter or to watch over the factionless. Eric also added that after each stage they would be ranked, and those who ended up outside the top 10 would be cut. The first stage of physical training began. They ran for several hours a day, shot rifles at mannequins, and competed while learning new forms of hand-to-hand combat. On the very first day, Chris told the first jumper, who was Triss, to step into the arena to compete against the last jumper, adding that the fight would last until one of them lost consciousness. At first Triss was afraid to enter the fight and stepped outside the arena, but then she pulled herself together, only to receive several punches to the face and get knocked out. After the fight, Chris showed the recruits a board on which their results were recorded at the end of each day. Anyone below the red line would be eliminated at the end. That evening in the pit she was celebrating the victory when Four came over and told her she had done very well. At the end of the night the rankings were displayed, showing that Triss remained in the Dauntless faction after all. The next day during community service, hauling sacks of food, she suddenly noticed someone flashing sunlight into her eyes with a mirror. She went to investigate and found her mother, who had slipped in unnoticed to embrace her daughter. Her mother also explained that she was in great danger and no one must know the results of her test, not even her friends, because she was divergent, and people feared them. Those like her were being hunted by the erudite. She also warned that the second stage of training would be psychological, testing their reactions to fear, but that Triss would be able to fool it, since something like this had happened before. On the day of the second stage, Four invited Triss into a room with a chair and various instruments. He told her he would inject her with a special serum that would produce hallucinations drawn from her subconscious fears, and that he would be able to watch everything on a separate monitor. He administered the serum, telling her she would see her deepest terrors but to stay calm, everything would be all right. Suddenly she found herself alone near the protective wall. Nearby a fierce fire had broken out and large, frightening crows were circling overhead. Trying to run, her legs became stuck in quicksand, and the crows attacked again and again, slashing her with their sharp talons until she fell, and then realized none of it was real. Triss then found herself underwater among the seaweed, but before she could surface the session ended. Four explained to her that her hallucinations had lasted only 3 minutes, 4 times shorter than normal, and that next time she would handle it even better. Afterwards, she and her friends discussed each other's fears, when Peter walked over and asked why she overcame her hallucinations faster than everyone else and how she could interrupt them. Upon returning to the faction, Triss was attacked by 3 people in black masks who dragged her to the edge of a deep ravine and tried to throw her in. She pulled the mask off one of them. It was her friend Al. Then Four appeared. With fast and precise strikes, he scattered the attackers. Later, in his large room, while bandaging her hands, he told her that Al had attacked simply out of fear of being expelled from the faction. He was falling in the rankings while she was rising. In the morning when she woke up in his bed, Four came over and asked where she had gone the previous evening. She explained she had met with her brother, who was working in Erudite, and shared the Erudite's plans to remove abnegation from power. At dinner, Al approached her and began to beg forgiveness for what he had tried to do. She told him to stay away from her, because they would kill him. Half an hour later, people started making noise over some incident. Arriving at the scene, Triss saw them pulling Al's body up from the ravine on a rope. He had jumped in just 10 minutes earlier. On the way back she met Four, who told her she was not to blame, it had been Al's choice, and also that in the upcoming tests they would finally find out who she really was, and then kill her. Four said he would not let that happen. They went to a room for a joint fear test, but this time they would both be inside his mind, and she could learn how to overcome fears without raising suspicion. He first injected himself with the serum, then injected a serum into her neck as well, and with special indicators at their temples they both fell asleep. In an instant they both found themselves on a narrow metal bridge high above the ground, and she immediately recognized it as his fear of heights. He explained that a divergent would jump straight off, but if acting like a normal person you should do everything to cross to the other side. They overcame the first fear without trouble. Next they found themselves in a narrow, shrinking room, clearly his claustrophobia, and she had to find a way out. His third fear was accidentally killing a defenseless person. But since a dauntless must obey all orders without question, he would do it only if he looked away. The last and most terrible fear was his own father, Marcus, and it turned out that Four's real name was Tobias. When they began to resist, they woke up immediately. The morning after their intense night, Four took Triss to show her something very interesting. She watched the Erudite unloading some equipment. They had been doing this for several weeks already. He also showed her a glass vial of liquid that, when introduced into a person's body, made them more susceptible to influence. The time came for the final test. Triss entered a room where the top leadership of her faction was gathered, along with a large screen that would display all her hallucinations. Because smashing the glass as before was not an option. She spotted the pipe through which the water was flowing, immediately took off her jacket, and began stuffing it deep into the pipe. A moment later she found herself with her love interest in a room where he was pressuring her for sex, but Triss refused, and after a knee to the groin and a punch to the face, she finally woke from her nightmares. Right after that, Natalie came to her, placed a gun in her hand, and told her that to truly become dauntless she would have to choose which member of her family to shoot, and Triss was forced to fire. At last the entire nightmare ended. Immediately after the celebrations, everyone was gathered in one place and Eric ordered them to divide into 4 lines, telling them a tracking implant would be inserted at the end of each line. Triss tried to slip away to find Four, but Eric blocked her path, and while they were talking one of the staff injected a tracking implant into her neck. Waking up in the middle of the night, she saw Christina standing over her bed in a zombie-like state, along with other people who were getting ready to go somewhere. Triss pretended to be under the same spell and joined the queue with everyone else. Only one person in the crowd stood out, walking back and forth asking what was happening. Leadership realized he was Divergent, and without hesitation Eric shot him in the head. The zombified crowd then picked up weapons and boarded a train. Moving further along, she finally found 4 inside. It turned out he was also Divergent, and he took her hand. When the train stopped at a station, they continued on toward the Abnegation neighborhood. Armed soldiers were dragging defenseless people from their homes, shooting on the spot anyone who resisted. Triss and 4 entered her home, but her parents were not there. They went outside and tried to blend into the crowd, when suddenly Eric stepped out in front of them, sneering at 4 for obeying like a compliant drone. He pressed a gun to his head to check whether he was pretending. Suddenly Triss aimed a rifle at Eric while the faction leader aimed a pistol at her. Eric tried to take her weapon, but she shot him. 4 struck the leader, and they slipped around a corner, only to find themselves surrounded by a large number of armed soldiers. Hands bound, they were led to a room where Natalie was. She was visibly shocked and astonished to see them, then explained that they wanted to eliminate Abnegation because they were capable of destroying their entire faction system. Natalie then said she would take 4 with her and that Triss could be disposed of. 2 guards led her behind the building to a clearing and made her kneel. Just as they prepared to shoot her, several shots rang out, dropping the zombified soldiers dead on the grass. Her mother burst out of the bushes with a pistol, untied her daughter's hands, and Triss, grabbing a rifle, ran with her mother to safety. A chase ensued in which they were cornered in a narrow alley, and they began shooting back at the armed soldiers, who like zombies did not take cover but simply kept advancing. The last attacker was her friend Will, who didn't respond to her pleas, and she was forced to shoot him. After dealing with all of them, they continued along a wide street onto which heavy military vehicles and a handful of zombie soldiers appeared. During the exchange of fire, a bullet struck Triss's rifle and knocked it from her hands. Her mother, returning fire, helped her reach cover. Triss then saw that her mother had lost consciousness from a severe wound and appeared to have died. While she held her mother, gunfire continued, forcing her to flee to save her own life. Making her way through it, she spotted people hiding in the darkness, and from the other side her father stepped out toward her. He first asked where her mother was, then embraced Triss and understood she was gone. Her older brother was there in the warehouse too, and he kept repeating that he had fled as soon as he realized what was happening. Though he didn't know why the Dauntless were doing all this, Triss said they were all operating under simulation, under the influence of some kind of drug being controlled from within the Dauntless compound, and they headed there at once. Arriving, they saw around 5 armed guards at the entrance. Her father decided to show his bravery and was the first to go and draw their fire. When the guards were dealt with, Triss saw that they had managed to shoot her father, and the realization hit her that she had no one left except her brother. Breaking into the control room, she spotted 4 sitting in a chair, but when she tried to free him, he was so drugged that he attacked her. Janine appeared and said that all his thoughts, emotions, and memory had been erased by chemicals, and that Triss was now safe. The safety, it turned out, meant eliminating Divergents who refused to obey, those who could bring the faction system crashing down. When Janine left, one of the assistants transmitted commands to 4 through the control panel. He immediately attacked Triss, raining down punches and kicks. In the end, she grabbed a gun and aimed it at him, saying stop, but he would not listen. She then pointed the gun at her own head, and something clicked in his brain and he came back to himself.